So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for attending our mental health and mindfulness webinar today. I think this is certainly a topic that we have talked a lot about over the last year and how the pandemic has affected all of us as either small business owners, families, and our mental health. And so we've got a great team here today from the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity who are going to share with us some tips, some tricks, and some things that we can do to, really take a look inside of ourselves and see how we can be doing better to get through these next few months. I've already asked Linda about sleep and rest because I know that I am failing at it. So we know that that's going to be a topic of conversation later. So I am going to turn this over to Vicki Wright, and she will be able to introduce herself, and then we'll let our panelists do a quick introduction as well. So Vicki, thank you again for helping us coordinate this morning.
You're very welcome, Stacy, and thank you everybody for joining us today. So my name is Vicki Wright. I'm a site manager for the Clinton Township Field Office of Michigan Rehab Services. Today we're going to share with you a presentation on mental health and mindfulness specific to COVID-19. I will be monitoring the chat for any questions, but we'd like for you to use the Q&A section for questions, but you may use the chat to interact with the panelists, and that will be monitored. Please let us know of anything that you need along the presentation, and when our presenters are not actively presenting, we will also share questions. We'll be available for any of those after the presentation as well. Thank you for coming today, and we hope that you enjoy the presentation. We'd really like to cover some housekeeping, and that's just to exercise patience when it comes to technology. Please remember to mute your microphones and turn off your video feature. Please again use the Q&A feature to ask questions during the training, and please note that we will be responding to those at the end of the training. I'd like to take a moment and just let you know I'm joined by my colleagues today, Nasha Ely, who is a business relations consultant for primarily the Oakland County area, and Linda Watson, who is also a business relations consultant primarily for the Macomb area, and they will be delivering the presentation for us today. The learning objectives for today is to provide an overview of disability, discuss types of disabilities, define mental illness and mental health, discuss the impact of COVID-19 on overall mental health, social distancing, stress and trauma on mental health during the COVID-19, provide information that you can use to promote mindfulness and good mental health while working in unprecedented times, and address the benefits of self-awareness and overall self-care. And at this point, I'm going to turn the floor over to Linda Watson.
Thanks, Vicki, so much. Well, we're glad that you're here with us today, taking time to take care of yourself. So as stated, we are from Michigan Rehabilitation Services, which is vocational rehabilitation. And you may be asking yourself, what is vocational rehabilitation, or voc rehab, or VR for short? Well, many initially think that voc rehab is something related to substance abuse or physical rehab, but voc rehab is vocational, so it's entirely career and employment focused. VR has been around for about 100 years for the purpose of assisting qualified individuals with disabilities find and maintain employment. But we're also here to support the DEA&I efforts of businesses specific to disability. So VR is at the state and the federal level, represented by over 25,000 government employees with subject matter expertise in disability employment across the country. We have a $3.5 billion budget that allows us to serve over 1 million job seekers with disabilities and tens of thousands of businesses nationwide. We do represent the largest talent pool of qualified individuals with disabilities across the country, and we partner with businesses to ensure successful employment outcomes. Last year, we served nearly 35,000 folks across all 83 counties in Michigan, providing services to them based upon the customer's aptitudes, interests, experiences, limitations, and abilities. Our individual job seeker customers range from ages 14 and up with varied skill sets and again, different abilities and limitations. We do serve every disability under the sun, with the exception of those folks who are legally blind. They are served by our sister agency, the Bureau for Services for Blind Persons, and we'll provide some contact for them at the end. Some of our customers have not completed high school, and some of our customers have advanced degrees, so things like PhDs or even an MD, as was the case with a surgeon who came to MRS looking for assistance in maintaining his employment. Some of our folks come to us seeking that employment retention, like that case, and perhaps they need financial assistance to fund hearing aids in order to maintain their employment. While others have different needs, perhaps some with anxiety needs who seek assistance in interviewing to become employed. Our individual customers are unique in almost every single way, with the exception of one thing. They're all seeking to obtain and maintain employment. So to work with MRS, our customers have to be able to work in employment with or without reasonable accommodations. And our counselors work with them to explore that. They do that through testing, job exploration, service provision, job placement, accommodation implementation, and some serious follow-up to ensure that they are able to stay with their employment. There are many other services that our program provides on that side of the house, which are all to support competitive and integrated employment. It's truly individualized, which is why our counselors dedicate the time necessary to get information and work so intensively with our customers. On our business side of the house, where you'll find Nasha and I, we work with businesses again to support those DEA and I efforts specific to disability. This can look like many different things, so let's take a quick look before we dive into our material so you know who we are and why we're talking at you today. So while our counselors are preparing our individual customers for employment, we're working with businesses. We're working with you guys in many different ways to help you prepare for the talent, but also anything under the sun of diversity, equity, access, and inclusion for people with disabilities. So we'll work with you to prepare your organizations to hire and train employees with disabilities. We'll partner with you to provide a job-ready talent pool through apprenticeships, internships, and even just general talent and recruitment efforts, all based upon what needs you guys have. The need for talent continues to be the #1 ask for businesses, and I'm sure everyone on this call is feeling the pain points of what's going on right now. We work alongside business to provide talent that you actually need and that's qualified for the jobs you're seeking. We partner with numerous organizations like Michigan Works and the EEOC and the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. We have subject matter expertise in areas that we're trained in, but we also know when to reach out to other organizations so that way we can meet the needs that businesses have. We consult with businesses on matters related to the Americans with Disabilities Act, such as how to accommodate their workforce, those folks that have disabilities, how to help them retain employees, and how to help with return to work strategies after workplace injuries or illness. This is done again through partnership with businesses and oftentimes with the individual employees themselves. We have OTs on our team that can assist businesses with accommodation recommendations, job analysis, help you revamp your job descriptions so they're accurately reflecting what the job actually is. We also help provide guidance on strategies to help employees work smarter, safer, and keep their jobs along with their productivity. We work hand in hand with business on their self-ID campaigns and their affirmative action plans, and even in community events related to disability. Now more than ever, likely due to our virtual world that we operate in, we provide guidance and training to business regarding disability awareness through customized trainings, and a lot of that is virtual, just like we're here this morning. Perhaps that training is needed for your higher level folks or your middle management, your frontline, or every employee. We can do that for your company, and we do that free of charge, just like we're here with you guys today. Through the interactive training, we can help business explore subjects that are considered uncomfortable but necessary to move the dial on disability employment. We can help you work through situations, explore accommodations, and give you a platform to ask what we call the hard questions. We also pride ourselves on sharing information with businesses and not being the enforcement arm of the EEOC or, as I like to say it, the ADA police. So it's really a safe space for businesses to grow. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Nasha and launch into today's presentation.
Good morning. So we've already said the word disability a lot since we've been speaking. And everyone has a picture of what they consider a disability to be. It could be a family member that was, in quotes, different, or growing up with a classmate that utilized a wheelchair. People have told us that they assume a disability is one thing because that's their experience. So when they hear the word disability, the picture that comes to mind is typically based off of that person's experience and knowledge at that point. In vocational rehabilitation, or VR, we use the legal definition of disability as provided by the Americans with Disabilities Act. The ADA defines a person with a disability as a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activity. So what exactly is a major life activity? Major life activities include things such as eating, sleeping, seeing, hearing, walking, breathing, speaking, learning, sitting, standing, working. As you can tell, these are activities that we all perform daily and on a regular basis. It includes people who have a record or history of such an impairment, even if they do not currently have a disability. So what might that look like? This could include someone that is in remission from a cancer diagnosis, someone that is not exhibiting symptoms of a diagnosis. Maybe they're diagnosed with like lupus or Crohn's disease, or someone who's currently stable, or the condition is well controlled with therapy, medical interventions, or medications. And some examples of that could be depression, anxiety, or heart conditions. It also includes individuals who do not have a disability, but are regarded or perceived as having a disability. This one can be a little bit harder to understand. One good example to explain this is an employee may have been in a significant car accident maybe 4 or 5 years ago. He had injuries, was off of work for a while, and has returned to work, has worked for this organization for 15 years. There's an opportunity for promotion at his job, so he applies for a promotion. And then this individual is overlooked by the HR department because it is assumed that he cannot meet the physical demands of the position. Based on this assumption of disability, this individual could be protected under the ADA. So there are really two types of disabilities. There are visible disabilities that are typically readily apparent to others. They can substantially affect the person's life activities and may be present from birth or occur during a lifetime. Assistive devices such as a wheelchair, a scooter, a prosthesis, cane, or a service animal may be utilized by an individual with a visible disability. The other type of disability is invisible. They are not readily apparent to others. Some people often call them hidden disabilities, but invisible is a better way to explain that. They can substantially affect a person's activities.
One half is better than
Sorry.
1/4.
They can substantially impact a person's activities. And although a person has an invisible disability, it may create a challenge for the individual that has that disability, but others have more difficulty because they don't see the disability and don't realize that someone may actually have a difficulty or limitation. This is one reason why mental illness is still stigmatized so much.
So on the screen right now, what you're looking at is a list of various invisible disabilities, just as Nasha was talking about. And we're laying the groundwork for what we're moving into next. Take a good look at this list and that first column. Perhaps some of you had not considered that many of these diagnoses could be a disability. So my disclaimer is this list is not all inclusive. It's truly intended to give you an idea of different examples that could be considered a disability if it met that limit of one or more major life activities, just as we previously discussed. Maybe you know someone with one of these diagnoses. Maybe you yourself have one of these diagnoses. Some of these diagnoses have periods of remission and they could be asymptomatic, not showing symptoms, but what about when they're not? Now, we use the word disability, but we understand that not everyone that has a diagnosis that limits one or more major life activities wants to consider themselves disabled. And that's okay, that's a personal choice. After learning this information, perhaps you've realized that you already have individuals with disabilities in your workforce. So ask yourself these questions. Do you think employees feel comfortable discussing their limitations at work? How about with their managers? How about with their HR department or the folks that are working in HR capacities? Do you think your staff, your supervisors and managers and HR folks feel comfortable discussing disability, diagnoses, limitations, and accommodations? Do they know what's legally permissible in regards to these conversations? And ultimately, do staff really know how to interact with people with disabilities? These are some questions that if you need assistance answering them, we are a resource free in the community for you. So we'll provide our contact information at the end. But right now, once again, I want to focus on that first column and really dive deep into what mental illness is and what mental health is. For that, I'll turn it back to Nasha.
Mental illnesses are health conditions involving changes in emotion, thinking, or behavior, or a combination of these. Many disorders have been described with signs and symptoms that vary widely between specific disorders. Conditions may be occasional or chronic and affect an individual's ability to relate to others and function each day.
Pardon me and my technology issue, I couldn't get off mute. So on the screen right now, you're going to see some mental health facts. Approximately 1 in 5 adults in the US, so that's about 44 million, experience some sort of mental illness overall, such as depression or anxiety. Now, approximately 1 in 25 adults, so that's about 10 million, experience a more severe mental illness. So what's a severe mental illness? So those would be things like your personality disorders, schizophrenia, things like that. Now, half of mental illness begins by age 14. Think about that for a moment. And then 75% of mental illness begins by age 24. Maybe that makes you think about your kids, or maybe you're in that age category yourself. So mental illness includes 3 of the top 10 disabling conditions in the US. And if you didn't know this, antidepressants are the #1 prescribed and paid for medication by an employer's health insurance. And that's really followed by a close second of an anti-anxiety medication. So that tells us 2 things. One, it tells us there's a significant number of Americans diagnosed with a mental illness, and there are millions of people currently working successfully with mental illness. So if you're someone who has had your mental health under control, please know that anyone can be experiencing symptoms now because the way in which the world has changed. I think we can all relate to that. We have different demands that we're facing, and it's not really the normal that we've been used to. And I hate using the term new normal, but I feel like that's kind of where we're at. And if you do have a mental illness diagnosis, understand that the crisis that we've been experiencing for a little over a year now can really exacerbate those symptoms and might push someone with mental illness into a relapse. So the impact of poor mental health has really had a negative ripple effect in America. Individuals who have a diagnosed mental illness are at an increased risk for co-occurring conditions. Well, what does that mean? So either other mental illnesses such as anxiety with depression, or they develop a substance abuse disorder, perhaps as a way to self-medicate. It could also be that they've developed something like a more chronic health condition. They're more susceptible to things like cancer as well. Now, 19% of those with mental illness have a diagnosed substance abuse disorder. That's a considerable portion, but it's not just additional mental illness concerns. Just as I was starting to mention, those with a mental health diagnosis, a mental illness, are at an increased risk of other chronic diseases, such as diabetes and, like I said, cancer. So that is twice as high for adults who have mental illnesses as those who do not have mental illnesses. And poor mental health is also largely reflected in our justice system, where in juvenile systems, we have 70% of those incarcerated who have a mental illness, and 37% adults have a mental illness. Well, what about those that aren't incarcerated? So 17 million Americans are collecting Social Security disability benefits with a diagnosed mental illness. Well, how about those that are working and by some people's standards considered productive members of society, right? Well, depression and anxiety disorders equate to a loss of $1 trillion in productivity. That's a big number for businesses. So there's still an impact and still potentially needs that are going unanswered. Based upon the numbers shown, it should then be no surprise that mood disorders, and those are depression and anxiety, things like that, are the most common cause for hospitalization in the US for people under 45. And that is still the same, even with COVID. And unfortunately, despite the number of folks seeking treatment, suicide remains the second leading cause of death for individuals aged 10 to 34. There's power in number, folks. And even with the stigma that's associated with mental health and mental illness that Nasha was just talking about, these reported numbers are very high, too high. So it's important for us to take steps to improve our mental health through awareness and treatment interventions and really protecting good mental health.
Mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also determines how we handle stress, relate to others, and make healthy choices. Mental health is important in every stage of life, from childhood and adolescence through adulthood. All of the things that we collectively experience can negatively impact our overall well-being because we're currently still operating in crisis mode.
And it's important to know the difference between mental illness versus mental health. I myself, during this presentation, keep using them interchangeably, but we all have mental health. We do not all have a mental illness. But let's talk about how this is impacting us at work and how it's trickling into our personal lives. We just talked about what it's like to experience what mental health is, what mental health isn't. But what's the workforce saying? Well, problems at work right now are more strongly associated with health complaints than any other life stressor. That's pretty significant. 3/4 of employees believe that the worker today has more on-the-job stress than a generation ago. Not sure where you stand on that, but those are some statistics that we're finding in regards to mental health and how work is being impacted. And 1/4 of employees view their jobs as the number one stressor. That's pretty alarming when you think about we go to work so that way we can function in our after 5 p.m. life or whatever your work day ends. Now, I want you to think about this. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, workers must take time off because of stress, anxiety, and other related disorders on an average of 29 days a year. Think about that for a moment. That is almost an entire month. And if we consider February, it is an entire month. Now, it's not going to be cumulative, and it mostly won't look like what you think. So you're not going to get a call from someone who's in your workforce that says, hey, I need to take a mental health day. Not most likely, because the stigma is so high. So what you are likely to hear is, I have a flat tire. My child is sick. My dog needs to go to the vet. Now, yes, sometimes those cases are absolutely true and valid, but people are using those types of things as excuses in order to take care of themselves. And what they're needing to do is take more time to protect their mental health. Look at this bar graph. This represents all levels of your worker today, from your C-suite executives to your mid-level management and your frontline employees. Approximately 50% across the board are reporting that stress from their job always or often affects their personal relationships. And overall, 80% of employees indicate that workplace stress sometimes impacts their life outside of work. Once again, since we're all working to enjoy what comes after our metaphorical 8 to 5, we need to take steps to ensure that that number decreases. So right now, you may be asking yourself, why is this topic important to me? Though we've been collectively experiencing the world with COVID for over a year now in our country, we can all agree that our experiences in this era are different than anything we've ever had to experience before in our lifetimes. These times really are different, and we continue to have to ebb and flow as things changes. We're faced with different types of stressors and all sorts of unknowns over and over again. Everyone has experienced loss. We've experienced multiple losses too. A loss of control, our routine, our expectations, the hope of what's coming tomorrow. Some of us have been robbed of graduation ceremonies, weddings, even funerals in which we can mourn our loved ones. The loss of freedom when we had to retreat to our homes and socially distance from one another. The loss of social interaction, the loss of safety and our sense of security. Unfortunately, some people have experienced the loss of income by losing their employment. Some people have experienced a loss of identity. Maybe you defined yourself as something outside of your 9 to 5. You were the PTO president or the soccer coach or the youth group leader. Most of us have experienced a loss of work-life balance. We've either been working too much if we've been working remotely, or feeling like we need to work to make up for when other coworkers have to take time off. We've all heard about medical professionals sleeping in their garage or in their camper. Unfortunately, some of us have experienced a loss of health, and even more so, some of us have experienced a loss of loved one. Now more than ever, this is important to you, especially given that stress can weaken the immune system. It's important to be mindful of our own mental health and take intentional steps to promote good mental health. Let's break down what we are going through and how normal everything is that we've been reacting to. Nasha?
Thanks, Linda. Now, I know this slide says the 6 stages of social distancing, but if you are familiar, this is actually the 6 stages of grief and loss. As Linda has discussed, we have all experienced some type of loss during this pandemic. If you think about the time between last March and now, I'm sure you can see how you may have experienced these emotions along the way. Denial, bargaining, anger, possibly that relapse back through these stages, moving into depression, feeling like things will never be normal again. Life was better before this. And making your way hopefully to acceptance. This is all normal. Everyone is going through this in some way or another. In order to be resilient, we need to feel and experience these emotions and understand that you are not alone. Everyone is experiencing, not many people, not some people. Everyone is experiencing this at some level. As we begin to understand that this is normal, we also need to consider how grief and loss can affect us as it relates to stress. I apologize for my elementary school child right next to me. Stress can impact us all in multiple ways. We're going to provide examples of common stress reactions that often affect these 4 areas. Stress can impact our body, leaving us feeling fatigued and exhausted. Stress impacts our mind, causing confusion and leading to making possibly hasty decisions. Stress can wear on our emotions, causing us to feel apprehensive or guilty. And when our behaviors are affected by stress, we may be restless and accident prone. It's very important to be aware of how we're feeling normally and when or if our normal state changes so we can obtain medical or mental health interventions when necessary.
So poor mental health may not necessarily look like what you think it is. Back when I was in school and in college, there was a term going around called going postal, right? So it doesn't necessarily look like that all the time. It can, but it doesn't. It also doesn't look like the homeless man walking down the street mumbling to himself. That doesn't have to be the picture of poor mental health. In the workplace, it can be a change in a person, reflective of a lack of focus, being easily distracted or disorganized. Perhaps they're not making meetings on time, even virtually. And it can look like being angry or withdrawn or even subordinate. Those could be signs of poor mental health in you or in your coworkers. Due to the pandemic, we understand that many insurance companies have started providing telemedicine appointments, and some have been waiving copays. It's a great time to explore that and make sure that you're taking care of yourself. Now, we recognize that most people on this call probably aren't trained mental health care professionals, but please understand that as coworkers and team members, you can play a vital role in creating a mindful workplace. If it's something that you're looking at, potentially seeking professional help or just talking to someone, I know a lot of us have done it. I've personally done it during the pandemic. It's been very helpful. Maybe you want to look at exploring what your companies have to offer, those that you work with. Maybe they have an EAP or an ESP that you could potentially take advantage of. And if you don't have any of those resources available inside the company that you work for, and maybe your insurance doesn't provide this, we will provide you guys some resources at the end of this, including some free things from the state of Michigan that have been developed just to care for folks going through everything that we're doing right now. But what is a mindful workplace? Well, let's dig into that a little bit more. And Nasha's going to explain to you what mindfulness is, because that too is not necessarily what you think it is.
So for me, this has always been what I thought mindfulness looked like, kind of the person doing yoga with the bun pulled back. But mindfulness is the quality or state of being conscious or aware of something. This awareness can be internal or external and is achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's feelings, thoughts, and bodily sensations. So let me ask you a question. Do you think being mindful is active or passive behavior? If you said active, you'd be correct. And for the purpose of today's training, we'll be talking about mindfulness in action and being intentional. So when you're interacting with others, you should consider some of these tips. Being virtual, if you're still working virtually, we can't read body language. We don't always see facial cues, especially because we're wearing masks. We are all in a crisis. We may not be in the same boat, but we are all in the same storm. We are all human. Have compassion and concern for others and be conscious of your own tone, body language, and facial expressions. We never know what someone else is dealing with. We should be realistic in our expectations for ourselves and our coworkers. We're in a new normal and we're all trying to navigate our way through it. If you think about it, there are 4 generations of employees in the workplace, and we're all learning new ways to work and survive during this pandemic. Commend the effort that people are putting forth. Listen with empathy, express sincere concern, and listen to gain understanding of what someone may be experiencing. We should avoid a critical spirit and a spirit of judgment, and we should speak positively. Avoid rumors, fear-mongering, and don't instill panic in others. Linda?
All right, so this part of the training we hope is a little bit interactive. I can't see you, you can see me, so you'll be able to see what I'm doing. But please try to follow along. These are some great tips that you can walk away with today that should be helpful to you. They're practical tips that you can do every day to improve your mental health. Now, again, as we go over them, I encourage you to do them, try them right now as we're doing them. There's only a couple that require your participation. So mindful moments. Self-care isn't something that you do just in your spare time or on your vacation, which we probably all need a vacation at this point, but it's a disposition, it's an attitude, it's an ongoing state of body and mind. It's also a way of grounding yourself. We encourage you to take time each day to shift from a mode of doing an action to one of pausing and being with whatever is happening right now. So as you sit, stand, or move, we want you to notice your feelings, your thoughts, and your body sensations as they come and go. Greet whatever you find with an attitude of openness, curiosity, and compassion. Rather than signifying a time to tune or veg out, maybe in front of the TV, take some time to tune in more closely to your experiences, and it'll help you respond to life with more clarity and wisdom. Taking time to be with yourself in this way on a regular basis is at the heart of what is known as mindful meditation. It's often practiced together with the next technique, awareness of breath. So right now, I want you to place your hand on your abdomen, okay? Notice how it rises and falls as you breathe. For 10 seconds of silence, I'd like you to focus on your breathing. Notice your breath as you inhale and you exhale. Just take time to observe your breath. Don't force it, and see if you can become aware of the breathing in your abdomen. Ready? Go. Okay. Put aside time each day to breathe in that way. This allows you to recognize breathing when you're stressed versus when you're not, as well as how to get yourself back to a state that's not stressed. And when you find your mind wandering throughout the day, which it definitely will do, just bring it back to gently focus on your breath. This is also useful to do when you feel anxiety creeping in. By practicing this, the breath becomes an anchor and it can help you maintain your focus on the present. Body awareness. Right now, where you sit during this presentation, notice whether your body is tense or relaxed. If there's any parts of your body that are tight or constricted, tense them even more for a second. Notice that sensation and then release it. Become familiar with parts of your body that are usually tense when you're stressed. Give them a frequent tension check and soften them when possible. Set aside time each day to do this with your body too. This can be something that can help you release tension, okay? So I'd like you to follow along with this exercise. Ball up your fists really tightly, tense up your arms, raise your shoulders up to your chin, hold it there, and gently release down your shoulders, release through your arms, and open up your hands. Okay, hopefully you felt a release in your muscles. That can be effective for stress as well. It's also important to note that if you're experiencing pain across your shoulder blades at the end of your workday, that could be attributed to stress as well. We carry the weight of stress physically on our body across our back between our shoulder blades. So it could also be your posture. So make sure that you're sitting in a healthy and ergonomic manner throughout your workday. Don't sit on the bed or on the couch. Try to sit in an actual chair at a 90-degree angle, because physically, your body will have that toll. And if you're experiencing stress as well and carrying the weight of stress, it will kind of work cyclically and keep hurting you throughout the day and days to come. So awareness of thought. Take a moment to see where your thoughts are right now. Are you with me? I hope you're with me. I hope you guys are paying attention. Are they focused on what we're doing right now? If they're far away, maybe you're thinking about yesterday or you're thinking about grocery shopping later, come back to me. Stay with me here in the present. That's awareness of thought. If you do that on a regular basis, that exercise will help you concentrate more effectively. Single focus tasking. Now, I know we've all been asked to multitask at least one point in our professional careers, right? Well, multitasking is more suited for computers than it is for humans, because human beings are actually not capable of multitasking. And if you've never heard that, that is a fact. So what we end up doing is actually switching rapidly from one task to the other, and we forget things and we don't give our best to all the tasks that we're trying to accomplish at once. We're really better served by being organized, and when asked to multitask, making a list or marking where we're at. Then we can divert our attention into the other tasks that we were given, and when we're able to return to the first task, we can come back and give it our all. Ideally, if you can start a task and see it through to completion, you're going to be better served with that and less stressed. However, we know that is not the norm in the world that we live in, right? So utilizing organization techniques will allow you to give your full attention to one experience at a time and reduce your stress as well. Social support. The relationships that you have with your family, your friends, and your colleagues are a vital source of nurturance and comfort. On a practical level, they provide concrete assistance, valuable information, and companionship. On an emotional level, they foster a sense of belonging, which every human being needs. Now more than ever, we have to be creative and super intentional about how we manage and maintain those relationships and connections. Altruism. So if you're not aware of this, and altruism is finding small ways to give to others, but if you're not aware of this, the act of giving to someone else actually benefits the giver more than it does the person who's receiving. It may be hard to think of how you can do this now, considering the socially distant environment that we operate within. But again, this is something where you need to stretch a little bit and be creative. You could shop for a friend or a loved one. You could do some spring cleanup in their yard, especially today and tomorrow because it's going to be beautiful, right? Or maybe you can set up a meal train for a sick friend or a family member. Or just ask someone what they need right now and follow through. The act of giving gives you more. So attention to small wonders of life. Every day will be enhanced if you take a moment to slow down, pay attention to something of wonder around you. Well, what does that mean? It could mean the way the sun hits the trees, a cool breeze coming through the window, the robins that have returned, the buds that are forming on trees. Think of this as looking at the world through a child's eyes. we encourage you to see things for their beauty and as a small wonder. Mindfulness at work. Though all of these tips require that you're intentional about doing them, this one especially so. We all get caught up in working from time to time, but it's important that we take the breaks that we need because we need and require them, even if you're working from home. So maybe we need to pay attention to this one so much more than any of the other ones right now. And if you're someone who works through your lunch, stop it. Stop doing it right now today. Take your breaks. When the workday is ended, turn off your computer and walk away. End your workday and begin your after work life. And while you're at work, make healthy food choices. Okay? Research shows that when you make a healthy food choice, you'll notice more positive feelings overall in your body and your mind. And that will reinforce the behavior to continue making healthy food choices, which continues the cycle of helping you feel good. Professionally, if you ever find yourself in what we call self-depreciation mode, so saying things to yourself like, I can't do this, or I'm not capable of this, I'm not qualified. Again, stop it. Remember that most people suffer from what we call imposter syndrome. And that's simply the feeling that we're just pretending, that we don't really belong, we're not good enough. Our true inadequacy will become obvious to everyone around us eventually, and for right now, they're just being snowed. The fact is that everyone you work with, no matter how self-confident they seem, experiences self-doubt. It is the human condition. Those are just thoughts, and you don't have to believe them. How many of you don't ask for help? If this is something that's completely foreign to you, you're someone who kind of likes to do everything by themselves, again, stop it. Remember what I just said about altruism. When you ask for help, you show that you are appreciative and potentially you depend upon others, that you value the work that they do. Since helping people makes us feel good about ourselves and connected to others, instead of defaulting your answer to no, I don't need help, or I got it, I'm fine, when someone offers you help, try saying yes. Finally, in the work that you're doing, if you can, if you work in an environment, in an office or any other environment really, decorate your space that breathes life into you. When many of us went remote, we left our items at our place of employment. So if you're still remote, decorate your space with things that breathe life into you. And if you're back into your office or your facilities or your warehouses, make sure that you have those items that still breathe life in you alongside of you. Acceptance, flexibility, and non-judgmentalism. So mindfulness isn't a test of your skills, and it's certainly not a competition. There's no final exams, no papers to write. We want you to relate to yourself with a sense of caring, curiosity, open-mindedness, and acceptance. Remember that everyone is going to experience and react differently to life, and especially to the situation we found ourselves in for over a year now, unfortunately. We need to meet people where they're at right now, and that includes ourselves. So as you're giving other people a break, give yourself a break too.
Some people are now spending, well, hopefully more time at home than usual. And here are some suggestions for staying active, engaged, and they may possibly lead to creating new positive habits. Learn something new, like painting or drawing. Stay active by exercising virtually, on site, or outside now that the weather is getting better. Be creative. Make small home improvements or do-it-yourself projects. Keep your brain busy with puzzles, brain training, and word searches. If you choose not to do any of this, that's okay too. Everyone will cope differently during this time, and there's no expectation that you have to engage in any of these suggested activities, but these are just some things to consider if you have a run out of ideas or need other ways to relieve stress.
Right now, it's very important to folks to find out what's going on in the world. We have multiple outlets in which we can do that. News sources, social media, friends, family, but I want to highly encourage you to set limits on your exposure to those outlets, whether it's social media or news sources. Set limits on those outlets, because that interaction and that constant source of news and updates and change is definitely having an impact on Americans today. We know that awareness creates control, but too much exposure increases stress and anxiety. We want you to focus on the facts and known information, and recognize again that things are constantly and still changing, unfortunately. Avoid unknowns and that what if thinking, drawing those conclusions, okay? Look for credible news sources, and definitely limit your communication with negative sources. Things that you notice in yourself are increasing your own anxiety and fear. We know that everyone is processing our current situation differently. Some are processing it much more negatively than others, and maybe they wish to share that or vent, right? And maybe you are the person that they come to. This may be occurring even in your own homes, which prevents us from potentially limiting it if it was coming from an outside source. Therefore, it's going to become really important that you establish healthy boundaries in the amount of time that you'll permit spent discussing that, even in your own homes. So you'll not only manage the amount of time that you spend taking this information in, but you'll manage the amount of time talking about this information as well with your family and friends. Well, folks, if you are someone who needs to hear this, I hope you have your listening ears on. You have permission to rest. Many of us think that we don't. Many of us think that we are machines, but we are not. If you do not shut the machine down, it will not get the rest that it needs, and it will not be able to operate the following day. So if you're not sleeping when you should be sleeping, like some people I know, this is your advice. Get the rest that you need. Process what's going on. Nasha mentioned earlier slowing down. It's okay to take a day off, and if you have that sort of leave that's associated with your employment, do that. Even though some of you may still be working at home, you can take time off at home too. And if you're not working at home, remember to take the vacations that you need to, even if you can't go somewhere. Those are required for us to maintain our self-care and our mental health. I want to give you an example for a moment. Let's just say that you have a friend who calls you and says, hey, I want to go for a morning run tomorrow, and let's get up before work and we'll do this. We're going to do this at 5:30 a.m. And you're like, wow, okay, but I'm going to do it. So you get up really early in the morning, only to have your friend text you 15 minutes after you've already had coffee, so you know you're not going back to sleep. And your friend says, I'm sorry, I just wanted to sleep in. I'm not going to do this. Okay. So same friend calls you and says, hey, let's go out and hang out at this outdoor venue and have a couple drinks Friday after work. You're super excited about that. You guys make plans to do that. And then your friend calls you during the day and says, oh man, I'm so sorry, but the series is dropping on Netflix and I'd really rather do that than go out. How long would you put up with that from a friend? Once, twice, maybe 3 strikes and you're out? Why do you do it to yourself? We constantly break dates with ourselves. We constantly say, I'm going to start this new workout routine. I'm going to eat better. I'm going to go out and socialize. I'm going to go to the park. And then we find every excuse not to do that. If you wouldn't put up with that from a friend, don't put up with it from yourself. Be the friend to yourself that you actually want to have.
Remember, mental health is not a diagnosis. Mental health and wellness is multidimensional and includes physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, personal, and professional health. Each one of these dimensions are part of your quality of life, and if one is neglected over a long period of time, you may see negative effects in your overall health. Today, we've discussed a lot of options to improving self-awareness and having overall good mental health. In addition to the activities and suggestions provided throughout the presentation, this self-care wheel provides additional activities that you may also consider. There's a lot that we can do for ourselves to have good mental health, but we also want to provide you with some external resources that may assist during this pandemic. These are local and national resources to address mental illness and supports for those in need. You will also find some videos that address wellness, stress relief, and mindfulness. We talked about managing information and reliable sources. We included information from the state of Michigan and the CDC that is regularly updated. The CDC has specific resources for stress and coping with COVID-19, and Mental Health America has resources for mental health and COVID-19. Some people are not safe in their homes, and abuse, neglect, and domestic violence are an unfortunate reality for many. We have some specific resources to help in those situations. Please remember to follow up with your individual insurance providers for specific information related to insurance coverage and providers where you can seek services. If you have access to an EAP or Employee Assistance Program, that could be the starting point to getting support.
Now we're going to go ahead and turn things over to Vicki. I don't know if we've had any questions that came up during the presentation, but truly the remainder of the time is for you guys to ask questions and let us help you.
Well, hello again, everybody. So thank you, Linda. Thank you, Nasha, for sharing all of that information. Hopefully it really kind of sunk in for our participants as well. And right now I don't have any questions in the Q&A session here, at least that I can see. So we'll give everybody a moment to type some of those in. And there were some comments in the chat. They mostly came from the panelists and myself, just kind of giving some little tips or asking like, is this kind of hitting you? So go ahead and take a moment and ask any questions that you may have in the Q&A session. I'm also going to drop in a link for a survey that we will be asking for everybody to please take a moment to complete for us so that we can, really kind of heed any thoughts that anybody shares and make this training as beneficial as possible and really kind of hit home so that way you feel as though it really connected with some needs that you have or those around you.
While people are putting their comments in the chat, I wanted to go back to something I put in there. I know most people have heard of Zoom fatigue, and also something has been around, but it's been brought up a lot more recently, cognitive load, which is based off of cognitive load theory. These are real things. So we will provide resources, and we can put a link for some information in that resource, just so you can kind of see what cognitive load really is. 9 chances out of 10, you're experiencing it. The forgetfulness, just being exhausted, not being able to focus are kind of some of the signs of that. So I looked into it for my own self and was like, oh, wow, this is what's going on. Because for a minute, I thought I may have to talk to my therapist about attention deficit disorder, because that's how it was affecting me. So if you have the opportunity to look that up, I would say look it up. There are some tips and resources available to manage it, but most people are experiencing cognitive load and definitely Zoom fatigue.
And thank you for that, Nasha. We do have a couple questions for you. We have from Rebecca. How do you learn to say no when it's just too much?
Yeah, this is Linda. I'll address that. That's really hard. It can be especially hard for folks who are working, maybe managing multiple things, your household, or even just yourself. Setting boundaries is one of the toughest things that you will do in your life because it's dependent upon you and it's not one universal applicable thing for every person. When you start to feel like it's too much, that's a good indication that you probably should have said no 6 times ago. I would encourage you to start mapping out what your week looks like. And some people may think that's a little bit much, but map that out. And when you find that you have more things going on than you have rest time, including your sleep schedule, you know that you need to start saying no. It's hard for other people to hear no to. And I'm just going to say this flat out, that is their problem and not your problem. If you're someone who is into people pleasing like myself, that is one of the hardest things to do when it comes to setting up boundaries, because you don't want to disappoint others. But if you continue to do things like this, I'm going to give you an analogy. Maybe you've heard it, maybe you haven't. When you're getting on an airplane and the flight attendants are telling you what you need to do in case the plane starts going down, the oxygen mask drop down, right? Let's just assume you're sitting next to someone who can't take care of themselves, or the person who keeps asking you to do things that you need to say no to. If you don't put the mask on for yourself first, you will pass out from lack of oxygen and won't be able to help that person. That's the same rule applicable to everything in our lives. If we don't take care of us first, set those boundaries, healthy boundaries, say no to some things, not everything, we will pass out and we won't be able to say yes anymore.
Thank you, Linda. And we all know it is much easier to say this than to actually put into practice, but each time you put it into practice, you're going to build those strong foundational skills. So thank you so much for that. And we have another question. So we have, hi, thank you for today's webinar. Do you have any tools or skill sets that we can use when any of the bad habits start back up?
Yeah, I would say keep this information in hand. We do have a resource sheet that we'll share with Stacy, and she can send it out to registrants, because this isn't something that if you're not used to doing these things on a regular basis, you'll probably lose them if you don't incorporate them. I cannot say this word enough, but it's all about being intentional. So like I said, I encourage people to keep schedules, even schedule breaks, schedule downtime, schedule time to go out and experience those small wonders. I had to start doing this with my whole family at the beginning of the pandemic, and we had never done anything like that before. Yes, we break from our schedule now and then, but that really helps us stay on track and make sure that we're having good balance in our lives. Nasha, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
Yes, there are tons of resources out there that a lot of people don't know about, including us. So we are now very familiar with one through the state of Michigan called Stay Well, mental well-being. I just put the link in the chat and it'll be included in the resource that comes out. There are tons of resources on there that'll provide you with information. It's for caregivers. It is, they have virtual support groups, helplines, webinars, behavioral health guides, video resources, all types of things to maintain that overall good mental health and wellness.
You know, a lot of folks are afraid to actually reach out to someone and do a kind of check-in call. That can be a really scary thing. That's why we shared that slide that talked about how mental health providers look differently now since the pandemic. It can be a little less scary to have a telehealth appointment with a counselor or a psychologist than it can be to do a face-to-face. If that's something you're thinking about, I encourage you to explore it. You don't have a commitment to that person. If you do it one time and it's not for you, then it's not for you.
Thank you. We also had a comment that was just noteworthy here. It says, good thing we're not all on camera. I have my child next to me whistling and blaring the TV and his tablet at the same time. So believe me when I say I understand. So yeah, definitely. That kind of challenges your mindfulness right now. But you could do it.
Ladies, thank you so much for all of this. I think, I definitely felt that, Linda, there was one point in the presentation, I think you were talking to me directly, which I know I'm not the only one that felt that way. So I can't say how valuable this information was. We've recorded this. We will share it not only with the presenters today, or with the people who attended today, with our attendees, but also, with our general chamber population as well, because this was very, very valuable information and really good to talk about it too. That, if we make one change a day or even one change this month, we're all kind of getting towards the right direction.
Thank you so much for having us. And again, this goes out to the chamber and any members of the chamber. If there's anything you need us for, please tap into us. We are a really great free resource in the community, and this is how you can contact us.
And we will certainly share all of your contact information as well. So, I look forward to the resource document. We'll get that out as soon as possible. Again, thank you all so much. Everyone have a wonderful day. And remember, the one thing we're not going to do today is eat lunch at our desks. That's my takeaway from the day. So have a great rest of your week. Enjoy the sunshine, and we'll see you all soon.
Yep, and please don't